Fight!
Welcome to another week of New Game Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game, and then we sit down and we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
Nolan's the guy that's not me.
You just ruined that.
Come on, you gotta flow with it.
But if
My name's Kenny.
if you always go second, why didn't you go second, Kenny?
Oh, we've gone like twice. Is there precedent set already?
Hey,
And I am Nolan.
We are kind of a big deal now.
yeah, 3 weeks in and it's getting to our head.
Absolutely.
Before we get into game discussion, which we should do fairly quickly, I just, these people don't know us, and for our listeners to have a better understanding of who we are, I think it would be good maybe just to elucidate on your favorite game genre, just so they can know who they can make connections to. Maybe Kenny, for example, what is, and you don't have to get too technical on this, you don't have to think really deeply, but what's one of your favorite gaming genres, and then maybe what's one of your favorite games, either of all time or currently or anything like that?
I tend to be a thinker, so I am a strategy and RPG kind of guy.
Okay, and any particular game that stands out in that genre?
Love StarCraft as a classic real-time strategy. Love all of the Final Fantasy series that I've played. Haven't played them all, but enough. I know, blasphemy. Yeah, and everything else that goes in those boats.
Nolan?
I tend to enjoy adventure games, and also, unlike Kenny, I like turn-based strategy. So one of my favorite turn-based strategy games is Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
And my favorite game series is Zelda. So that's my adventure game is Zelda.
Yeah, and I love RPGs. I just want to get immersed into a good story with developing characters and not come out of it for a few weeks. So, Kenny mentioned it, but Final Fantasy games, and yes, I've played all of them. So they are, I like Final Fantasy games. Just recently played Mass Effect for the first time. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to Mass Effect 2. Just kind of those games that really take you into. Red Dead Redemption is another game that's a lot of fun. So that's kind of my genre.
I can say that what I've realized is that being a gamer who enjoys those kind of games, that I tend to not like first-person shooters as much.
Yeah. And speaking of,
which brings us squarely.
Well, last week we played Half-Life, and so I've got to ask you, did either of you play any more Half-Life?
I did. I played a little bit more. I didn't play as much this last week as I did the week we were playing it, but I went back and made a little bit more progress.
I might have beaten Half-Life 2 yesterday.
Yeah, so
you went hard? Nolan got addicted.
Yeah. Well, and I did. I finished Half-Life, the first one, the game that we were playing and talking about last week, and enjoyed it. So I'll at some point play Half-Life 2, and probably then, along with everyone else, ask where's Half-Life 3. Sorry, Nolan. So anyways, that was the game we played last week. Every week we play a new game, and at the end of last week's podcast, both Nolan and Kenny, both of you said something as to why we are doing this, and I just want to bring that up one more time because I think that's huge. Nolan, you said to keep in large part we're doing this to keep some of those old games alive, and then Kenny, you said to appreciate the games that we have now, and I think both of those are key reasons why we are doing this podcast. Yeah,
I would agree.
That's why we're doing it. It's called New Game Plus because that's on many games. That's an option after you beat the game if you want to go back and play it again. And so that's kind of this whole idea. Are these games worth playing again? And which games should just be left in the dust? And so this week we played Perfect Dark.
Overview.
64 was a fun console, I gotta say.
Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorites.
It was. Why was it so good?
I don't know. It was a number of things.
Such as?
The first little joystick was fun. Graphics finally got to a place where they could do some more immersive kinds of three-dimensional stuff. It was just Like, it was a fun place where games still felt game-ish, not like the polish and over-realism that we sometimes get now.
Yeah.
But had progressed far enough that they could do some more intriguing things.
Plus, it had a rumble pack.
Yeah.
It did.
And an expansion pack, which was
Which
required
you had
for
to
this
play.
game. Yeah.
Yes. And it was also required for Majora's Mask. That was always frustrating for me because I rented Majora's Mask after I beat Ocarina of Time from Video Giant. And I couldn't play it because it needed an expansion pack.
Yeah, bummer. Kenny, you tell us a little bit about Perfect Dark for those that have never heard of it or never played it?
So Perfect Dark is a first-person shooter that was one of the last ones released on the 64, which was kind of cool, and that it gave them a lot of options to really push that console kind of to its limits on what it could do. They introduced a lot of new things, and that's why the expansion pack was required, because they really were doing more things than most other games had done, which was cool. It's a successor made by the same people who did GoldenEye. That's the super, super classic shooter on the 64. And yeah, I put 2 supers there. And it's got a weird story about space and stuff.
A really weird story. I think this will be kind of one of our most recent retro games, because it literally came out in 2000, like May 22nd of 2000. And so...
Right at the 15-year.
Right at the 15-year mark. So this is about the newest retro game that we're probably going to talk about, at least for a while now.
A couple years from now, that might change.
Well, sure. But when, Kenny, you mentioned that it is like a successor to GoldenEye. It's not in the same story. It's not the same characters, but
it's the same developers, and it's based on the same engine, mainly. So it feels and plays in a really similar kind of way.
Well, not only that, like, did you not feel like you were playing GoldenEye Part 2?
Absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately.
The enemies, the enemies, their faces are those, like, images of like, real pictures.
Right.
You know?
It's that thing in GoldenEye where, like, it's that really bad 3D animation, but then over the character models, they wrap, like, a real image of somebody's face.
So they're like, yeah, that looks real, that's good.
Right. But, like, there's same animations, same look, same kind of, like, gun
same
style.
engine, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little modified.
But one of the huge differences is that you're not playing James Bond. You're playing a female protagonist by the name of Joanna Dark.
Joanna Dark. You gotta say it the same way, at least.
Sorry. And so that was obviously huge. There was voice acting in this game, even more so than GoldenEye.
That's generous.
I what, voice acting? Yeah, I love because, like, they straight up probably use, like, MP3s, and you can hear the click of the mic start and end, like, when the voice acting happens.
And they took, like, 5 clips that they used for all the, like, NPCs.
Yeah.
Why
over
me?
And over.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That was my favorite death quote.
Yeah.
Why me? And then, what the?
Yeah.
Like, they're confused. Like, with the alarms going off and their comrades getting shot, they're surprised when they get shot, too. I don't know. He's bad.
Let's talk about gameplay.
Gameplay.
The first stage kind of starts where you infiltrate a building to retrieve an AI, right? So, and then the story kind of builds on that. But here's the thing. So it starts off as just like a futuristic, like...
It felt like Tron to me, or something like that.
Can we kind of clarify? You say AI, it's a floating laptop.
Yeah.
With creepy eyes.
Right. Right. And it's supposed to be a big deal because you were thinking you were meeting up with a guy, but apparently the guy is an AI. But kind of the thing that I'm wanting to point out is that this game is like a futuristic James Bond. That's what it felt like for the first 3 or so stages. And, you're doing stealth missions, and you're, getting equipment that's been dropped off for you in the gutter so that you can infiltrate this building. And so you're just doing like these seemingly normal things. But then when you get to stage 4, something in the story dramatically shifts to where you're no longer in this realistic future, but you're face to face with a straight up alien. And it's not even like a creative alien, it's one of those
typical
old school big head aliens.
Like straight from Roswell, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and you said Roswell, you go to Area 51, and that's where
absolutely.
you find them.
They play right into the stereotype.
But then it only gets more crazy from there, because within the next few missions, you've got to rescue the president, send him off. You're on the president's plane. What's that called again?
Air Force One.
Air Force One. You're like, this story just unravels, and I didn't even mention the alien's name.
What,
do I get to say it?
Sure.
Elvis.
He says, just call me Elvis. And so you've got a talking alien that's gray with a big head named Elvis. This game just unraveled at stage 4. I'm like, this is good. I'm kind of getting into this. And then it just becomes a comedy thing after that, in my opinion.
Yeah, to a degree. It's ambitious. I can appreciate it, though, because it is kind of silly. I mean, it's obviously silly, but I don't know. I commend them for going there.
I'm firmly in Dustin's camp on this one. Like, I love that they went sci-fi, and that's fun. Like, it's a great genre. But it made the story just so ridiculous, and like, I'm already not a shooter guy, and like, big gamer confession time, I didn't even really like GoldenEye.
Thanks for being on the show with us, Kenny.
We'll see you later.
I know. I'll be replaced as a host next week. I may actually be buried in the desert somewhere under Area 51, because it's such a classic game, and I enjoy watching gameplay. I've watched hours of it as people have played, but it's just not my thing. And so this game felt like something I already knew, like gameplay wise, I wasn't going to enjoy as much, just personally, style thing. And then was just kind of ridiculous on top of that. But there were some neat things, and it made me grin sometimes. So
you could play your main campaign on I think 3 different difficulty levels. Pretty much easy, normal, or hard. And then if you complete the game probably on the hardest setting, then you're able to play it through on the perfect dark setting, which just becomes where you can completely customize, the health of the enemies and their accuracy and the damage.
Which is awesome.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
It's a really cool thing. On the easiest setting, which your gun just automatically goes to their head every time, and so it's a pretty easy playthrough. And then you've got less objectives to complete on each stage. But as with 007, the more, or GoldenEye, the harder level or the harder difficulty that you're playing it on, the harder the level is, and the more objectives that you've got to complete, which is a cool function, I think.
It really is. And it seemed like from things that I saw, I didn't do any multiplayer, but that some of the multiplayer options and settings were what actually would have been, in my mind, the redeeming value of the game. Like your ability to go in and completely customize how your multiplayer teams worked out, and even put in intelligent AI and like things that to my knowledge, this was really the first time they'd been done well in a game. I feel like that was the place that probably they really made a mark.
You know what's really cool about that difficulty mechanic? It's actually really smart of them to do. And they could have just made the enemies hit harder or like have more HP. But with that, you also have more objectives that you have to complete that you didn't have in the easier mode.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to do difficulty, because if you just do like harder enemies, that can be annoying at times. In a lot of games, that's all they do.
I agree.
Yeah. And one other thing on gameplay, and then we'll move over to talk about how it aged. But one of the things that we didn't get to take advantage of now, just because it's a much difficult thing to do now, but it would have been very accessible back then. And one of the reasons why I think this game was such a success as it was the multiplayer functionality of this game. Had y'all known about this?
Yes.
No, I only realized some of that was there in reading about the game.
from playing it way back when, yeah, I knew there was a lot of multiplayer functions. I don't remember them all, but I know that there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I don't know them all either, but I know that there is a split screen co-op mode, which is awesome, where it's not just set in one of the stages battling enemies, it's set in the stages with the objectives. And so that's really cool, going through a story, the story together. That's early for that to happen, I think, in this kind of game.
It is. Well, and they did some creative things like objective-based, where you could do that same thing, but instead of playing co-op, you could play against each other, where one of you played
one of the enemies.
mission, and one of you became enemy NPCs and had to try and stop it.
Yeah.
And so, that's so creative.
Very creative. And I could completely imagine, me and my brother, or, me and a friend sitting at our home after we completed our homework, on a Thursday evening, playing that co-op or that other mode for hours on end. I could imagine us doing that for sure.
I like how you let us know that you did your homework before you played video games.
I was a really good student.
Moms everywhere are proud of you right now.
Shout out to all the moms that are listening.
Thanks, moms.
Aged.
All right, so age. Do you think it aged well?
I don't know. I feel like it's not as classic as GoldenEye, and that the most notable things that made GoldenEye popular are more about GoldenEye. And so, except for some of the fact that they kind of pushed what they could do graphically and pushed what they could do technologically, which looking back doesn't really matter when it ages at all. Like, what? I don't care if it's a slightly nicer 64 game. The story's fun, but nothing like earth-shattering, and it's more told through like cutscenes and those kind of things. And so I feel like it did okay. It's not one that if you like shooters and missed it, that you're going to regret going back and playing, but it's not one I would go out of my way to say made a difference in huge ways, at least in me. And maybe I'm just being a pessimist because I was kind of meh about it.
I think it just gets overshadowed by GoldenEye, unfortunately.
Yeah.
GoldenEye, although it was amazing and revolutionary for first-person shooter multiplayer, like that deathmatch style play, Perfect Dark kind of gets overshadowed because it is kind of recycled. But I think it was Rare, which is the developer, if we haven't said yet. I think it was them kind of doing more story-wise, and yes, it is ridiculous, but I feel like this Perfect Dark was more about the single-player aspect instead of the multiplayer, even though there was a lot of cool multiplayer features. So I do think it gets overshadowed by GoldenEye. Like, a lot of people don't even know about this game. So I don't think it aged well. I don't think GoldenEye aged well, although it's still really fun, but that was only fun because it came out and I played it a lot when I was a kid. I'm sure some people who played it now would think it's really stupid.
Yeah. No,
so it's weird.
I'm with the both of you. I don't think it aged well. Graphically, obviously, we've already talked about how these graphics did. This was a
cube hands and such.
Right. This was really just kind of a bridge from one era of graphics to another, and it's a rickety bridge, but it was necessary. But
yeah, it was important.
But it's one that is the bridge needed to stay where it was, and it did. I mean, that obviously we progressed past that, so I think the graphics didn't age well. Even the controls felt a little blocky to me, although I wasn't playing this time on a Nintendo 64 controller, so I imagine that it would have been a lot more reasonable back then. The setting with it being sci-fi, I think that was fun, but then when it went, I don't know, I felt like there's a disconnect, so that I can see some of the appeal back when it came out, and obviously it was wildly successful, but I don't think that it translates well to today, and I don't think it would give much replay value for people that are interested in going back and playing some old games.
I'm gonna say, in its defense, it did start a franchise, and it had enough of a popular user base for them to port it to Xbox Live Arcade.
Yeah,
Of
with
course they
updated
port
graphics.
everything. Yeah,
It
but
looks pretty good.
like we're knocking it a little bit, but it definitely, was popular and people cared about it enough to still care to some degree. I'm just not one of those people.
Well, it's set in 2023, so we're just a few years away from all this.
Yeah, so get ready.
8 years away from holographic aliens.
Get ready for extraterrestrials. What are the Mayans? That's one of the aliens.
Lions and a Skedar.
Yeah, the Skedar, which are reptile-like extraterrestrials, like the. I think one of the main villains, right? They called him Mr. Blondie for a while because they didn't know his name. Anyways, enough bashing Perfect Dark. Let's summarize.
The final shell shock.
Who would you encourage to play this game? If it's not for everybody, but if there were some people that wanted that you think would enjoy going back and playing it, who would be those people?
If you grew up with GoldenEye, you might have missed this game. So that's who I would suggest to go back and play it. And that's probably the only person I would kind of be able to convince that or see them enjoying it, because it's so similar, and it would be a little nostalgic, to be thrown back into those mechanics, into those graphics. Other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I gotta just say, like, my 10 minutes of playing last week's Half-Life again this game beat all the time that I played the actual game in my mind, so I'm knocking it really hard, and I don't know why. Like, it's a successful game, and it's great, and maybe I'm just a pessimist today, but if you're into shooters and you want to try it, go for it.
Rare was the company back then. They made they made GoldenEye.
Did they do Donkey Kongs?
They did Donkey Kong. They had great games.
Now, if we ever play some Donkey Kongs, you probably won't hear me whining as much.
Did you put an S at the end of Kong?
Yes, there was more than one Donkey Kong game.
Well, then
okay.
So if we play one of the Donkey Kongs...
Well, the Donkey Kongs is.
Just saying Kongs just sounds funny.
Kongs
I'll give you that.
The Donkey Kongs is. That's summing up that one game. Any last comments about Perfect Dark before we decide what game we're playing next week?
Rest in peace.
All right. Well, we've got something to talk about real quick, and we don't have to decide it right now. In fact, we could really use our listeners' help, but we've got to come up with a name for this list that we're compiling. It can't just be the list, I
kind of like the list.
Well, I mean, if it's something generic, it's got to be like the master list or the retro list, something along those lines. Make it
like the game list.
That's really creative. You're stepping out
edgy.
there. Yeah,
edgy, right?
Bring it back, please. We do need a name for this list because it's growing. We received through email and through personal conversation and through Reddit, we've received a lot of suggestions of games that we should play, and so we're yeah.
And that being the case, it's still a fairly lacking list relative to the breadth of classic games there are. So I'm sure that there's some holes. So if listeners may also be users. If you're addicted to this podcast already and you're a user and you have a game, tell us. We'll get it on the yet to be named list.
Yeah, it would be fun to get some games on there that I don't recognize. Most of the ones that are on our list I've heard of.
Sure.
Maybe not played, but I've heard of them. It'd be fun to see some that I'm like, what?
Yeah. Send us some worthwhile under the radar stuff.
Yeah, and you'll send it to ngppodcast@gmail.com. Stands for New Game Plus. ngppodcast@gmail.com. We have some great suggestions, really. I'm looking at Turok and the original Grand Theft Auto and Mega Man X and Doom and Quake and even Fallout, which we've got some plans for, and just some other games that would be a lot of fun to play and will be a lot of fun to play, I imagine, when the time comes. But we need some other suggestions, and then we need a suggestion of what this list should be called. So you can email any of those things to us. You can find us on Facebook.com/NGP Podcast. You can find us on Twitter.com/NGP Podcast. there's a theme there. I don't know if you've caught it, but please do that. And so, anyways, we've got our list today, and I'm gonna hit the randomizer button, and we'll find out what game we're playing. Is that cool?
I'm scared.
Me too.
And the game that we will be playing now is called Jurassic Park.
I quit.
No, you can't.
They made a game about that?
Yeah, the movie, the fourth.
Do you know like what console it is?
I think it's Super Nintendo. I think it came out on other consoles as well. It's an early game. Like, I'm pretty sure it came out in the early 90s. So,
Okay.
yeah. But hey, if you are listening and you'd like to play along with us, then, grab that emulator, or, man, if you've got that old console, pull out your Jurassic Park cartridge, stick that bad boy in, and let's play Jurassic Park. Send in some of your thoughts about the game, and maybe some of your, like, what you like about it, what you didn't like about it, and we'll possibly include that in next week's discussion. So
yeah, if you're more entertaining than us, which isn't a high threshold, there's no reason we can't read your emails.
Absolutely.
Kenny can't read, but
I mean they can't be read to you by one of us.
He's learning.
Yeah.
Kenny's learning. So, anyways,
one game at a time.
Thank you for being with us this week on New Game Plus. Can't wait to talk with you guys next week. Please, if you enjoyed listening to this, would you subscribe if you haven't yet? And then every 5-star rating and review we get on iTunes or Stitcher or any other thing that you're listening this on really helps with visibility. And it would be a great thing if you could take just a minute to rate and review. We would appreciate it for an eternity.
forever and ever.
Yeah, we would.
Oh, God.
We love y'all.
Bye.